Okay, so let's get into these drones over New Jersey. I mean, we've gotten a ton of articles from you guys about them. Unidentified drones buzzing around. Sounds kind of like something straight out of a movie, a sci-fi movie, you know?
Right.
Except it's not fiction. This has been going on for weeks now. And you're right to be curious about it.
You know what I find fascinating about this
Mm.
is that we just don't have any concrete answers. I mean, we have eyewitness reports, videos, even temporary flight restrictions in place, and still we're not sure who's operating these things or what they're doing.
It is a real head scratcher. I mean, the reports have been coming in since like mid-November. A lot of the activities centered around Hunterdon and McCabe County, New Jersey. Some of these reports even describe these drones as being like SUV sized.
Wow.
That's pretty massive. Is that even something you typically see with commercially available drones?
Not really. When you start talking about that size, I mean, that suggests a level of sophistication and purpose. That goes beyond, someone just kind of tinkering around with a hobby drone. We could be talking about drones with advanced capabilities, potentially even carrying specialized payloads.
Whoa. Okay, so not your average Amazon delivery drone then. And some of these sightings haven't even been isolated incidents. There are reports of drones like flying in formation,
Right.
which suggests a level of coordination and control.
Exactly. I mean, that kind of coordinated movement, that points to a deliberate objective, not just random flights. And, if you think about the technology involved in drones, to achieve that kind of precise formation requires sophisticated software and communication systems.
Okay, so we got large, potentially advanced drones
Yeah.
flying in formation. I mean, no wonder people are starting to get a little spooked. And initially it was local law enforcement trying to figure this out, but then things kind of escalated, didn't they?
They did. It went from, local police
Mm.
to members of Congress demanding briefings from agencies like the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, the FAA. It even reached the White House.
Wow. That's a pretty serious chain of escalation. But here's the thing. Even with all these agencies involved, there still seems to be this lack of clarity, almost like conflicting messages coming from different places.
That's right. You've got the White House on one hand downplaying the threat, but then you have lawmakers like Senator Cory Booker voicing some serious concerns. I mean, he even said protecting civilian infrastructure, safety, and privacy, as well as military assets and personnel, will require a comprehensive response.
Yeah.
I think you can understand why people might be feeling uneasy with such mixed messages.
I'd be a little unnerved too, especially with all the talk online about these drones. And speaking of online chatter, we can't forget about Congressman Jeff Van Drew's claim that these drones were being launched from an Iranian mothership off the East Coast.
Right.
I mean,
Well, the Pentagon quickly refuted that claim. They stated categorically that there was no truth to Van Drew's statement, denying any Iranian involvement whatsoever.
so that's one theory debunked. But it still leaves us with a lot of unanswered questions. If it's not Iran, then who is behind these drones and what are they doing?
That's the million-dollar question. There are a lot of possibilities. But without concrete evidence, we're left kind of piecing together this puzzle with what we know. One theory that's been put forward, even by the White House, is that some of these sightings may be misidentified manned aircraft.
So maybe people are just seeing things or mistaking planes for drones. That seems kind of hard to believe, though, especially when you consider those reports of like SUV-sized drones,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it does raise some eyebrows, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's where those temporary flight restrictions, issued by the FAA, become even more intriguing. They put restrictions in place around sensitive areas, like Picatinny Arsenal, which is, a major military research and development facility.
Hold on, temporary flight restrictions. So we're not just talking about your average no-fly zone here. What exactly does that mean?
Right, these aren't your everyday flight restrictions. They're officially called temporary flight restrictions, or TFRs for short. They're implemented when there's a specific need to restrict air traffic in a certain area for a limited time. There are different types of TFRs, depending on the situation. They can be triggered by things like major sporting events,
Yeah.
or VIP movements,
Yeah.
or security concerns.
Ah, okay. So in this case, with the restrictions around Picatinny Arsenal and even Trump National Golf Club, it sounds like they're leaning more toward those security concerns.
That would be a reasonable assumption. I mean, Picatinny Arsenal in particular is a highly sensitive location. They develop and test all sorts of advanced weaponry and military technology there.
Oh, wow.
So if someone is flying drones near that facility, yeah, it would definitely raise some serious red flags.
I can see why. It makes you wonder if someone is like testing out new drone technology, pushing the boundaries of what's currently possible, or maybe even trying to gather intelligence. And the FAA issuing those TFRs seems to confirm that they're taking this pretty seriously.
Absolutely. These TFRs aren't issued lightly.
Uh-huh.
It suggests that they perceive a genuine risk, whether it's to national security, public safety, or both. And it brings up this bigger question about the evolving nature of drone technology and its potential impact on security and privacy.
It's like we're stepping into a whole new world, one where that line between science fiction and reality is getting really blurry. Drones are becoming more advanced, more accessible, which is exciting on one hand, but on the other hand, it does raise concerns about how we ensure responsible use and how we prevent misuse.
Precisely. And this New Jersey case
Yeah.
really highlights those concerns in a very tangible way. We're talking about potential threats to critical infrastructure, the possibility of unauthorized surveillance, and even the risk of malicious attacks using drones. I mean, these are things we need to be prepared for.
It sounds like we're dealing with a double-edged sword here. On one side, you have the incredible potential of drone technology for good, and then on the flip side, you have these very real concerns about its potential for harm.
You've hit the nail on the head. And it's crucial that we address both sides of that coin. We need to foster responsible innovation while also putting in place safeguards to mitigate the risks.
So where do we even start? What are the steps we can take to navigate this complex landscape of drone technology? I mean, it feels like we're in uncharted territory.
We are in many ways, but that doesn't mean we're powerless. I think one of the first steps is to raise public awareness about drone regulations. You know, a lot of people might not even realize that there are rules about where and how you can fly a drone.
You're right. I'll admit I don't know much about drone regulations myself. I just assume you can't fly them near airports.
Well, that's a good starting point. But there's more to it than that. There are altitude restrictions, rules about flying over private property, and of course those temporary flight restrictions we talked about. So educating the public about these regulations can go a long way in preventing accidental violations.
Okay, so education is key. But what about those who intentionally break the rules? What can we do to prevent, like, malicious use of drones?
Well, that's where law enforcement comes in. We need to empower them with the tools and resources they need to effectively track and identify drone operators, particularly those operating illegally. We're talking about things like drone detection systems, which can use radar or other sensors to track drones, and advanced forensic techniques to analyze drone footage and trace it back to the operator.
Those sound like pretty high-tech solutions. Are those things readily available?
Some of them are already being deployed, but the technology is constantly evolving. And it's not just about having the technology, it's about ensuring that law enforcement agencies have the training and expertise to use it effectively. We also need to consider things like requiring drones to be registered and identifiable, much like we do with cars. That would make it easier to track down operators and hold them accountable for their actions.
That makes sense. If you can trace a license plate back to a driver, why not do the same with drones? But what about the privacy implications? I mean, there are already concerns about drones being used for surveillance. Wouldn't mandatory registration and tracking just kind of exacerbate those concerns?
A valid concern. And it's a delicate balance we need to strike. You know, we want to ensure accountability and prevent misuse without creating a system that infringes on people's legitimate privacy rights. And this is where open and transparent dialogue is essential. We need to involve policymakers, industry experts, privacy advocates, and the public in shaping these regulations.
I can see how that would be important. Getting everyone at the table to kind of hash out these complex issues could help us find solutions that address both security and privacy concerns.
Exactly. It's not about choosing one over the other. It's about finding a path forward that considers all the angles.
Yeah, it does sound like finding that balance is going to be crucial, especially as drone technology just keeps advancing. I mean, we've already seen so much progress, even in just the last few years. Who knows what's coming next? It's almost mind-boggling to think about.
It is. We're really on the cusp of a technological revolution, and drones are just one part of it. Think about artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, the Internet of Things. All of these advancements are kind of converging, and it's going to reshape our world in ways we can barely imagine.
So we've got this incredible potential, but also these potential risks. It's almost like a sci-fi movie, except it's happening right here, right now. And in the midst of all this, you have these very real, everyday people in New Jersey, just trying to understand what's going on.
Right. And that's a point worth emphasizing. We can talk about these abstract concepts like security and privacy, but for the people who are actually seeing these drones, it's a personal experience. Imagine, looking up at the night sky and seeing these large, unidentified objects flying around. It's bound to evoke a sense of unease, maybe even fear.
Yeah, it would definitely make me do a double take. And if I didn't have any information about what was happening, I'd probably jump to some pretty wild conclusions. It's easy to see how misinformation can spread, especially in a situation like this.
Absolutely. When there's a vacuum of information, it's quickly filled with rumors and speculation, and that could be just as dangerous as the actual threat itself. It can lead to panic, distrust, even vigilantism.
And we've already seen hints of that in some of the online discussions about these drone sightings, people talking about shooting them down, taking matters into their own hands. That's a recipe for disaster, right?
Without a doubt. Shooting down a drone is not only illegal, as we talked about, but it's incredibly dangerous. You know it could cause damage to property, injure people, even create more chaos and confusion. The best course of action, always, is to report suspicious activity to the authorities and let them handle it.
Okay, so we need to trust the authorities, but we also need them to trust us with information. That lack of clear communication from officials has been a major theme throughout this whole drone saga. Do you think that's contributed to the anxiety and speculation?
I think it's definitely a factor. When people feel like they're being kept in the dark, they tend to fill in the blanks with their own assumptions. And those assumptions aren't always accurate. Open and transparent communication from authorities is essential to build public trust and ensure that people feel like they're being informed.
Transparency seems to be a recurring theme, not just in this specific case, but in a broader sense. When it comes to technology and its impact on our lives, we need to be having these conversations, asking these tough questions, and demanding accountability from those who are shaping the future.
You're absolutely right. This drone mystery, as unnerving as it is really a catalyst for those conversations. It's a reminder that we're living in a world where technology is rapidly evolving, and it's up to us to shape that evolution in a way that benefits humanity as a whole. We need to be proactive, not reactive, and we need to approach these challenges with both optimism and a healthy dose of critical thinking.
Optimism and critical thinking. I like that combination. Feels like we need both to navigate this increasingly complex world. So what's the key takeaway here for our listener? What should they be thinking about as they go about their day, maybe even looking up at the sky a bit more often?
I think the most important thing is to stay informed, stay engaged, and stay curious. Don't just accept things at face value. Question assumptions, seek out multiple perspectives, and be willing to challenge your own beliefs. We're all in this together, and the more informed we are, the better equipped we'll be to make wise decisions about the future.
Well said. This deep dive has certainly given me a lot to think about. To our listener, keep those eyes in the sky, stay curious, and always remember to question everything.